The asset shown here uses decals from various different libraries. If you wanted to bring this into Unreal Engine 4, or Unity using HDRP, or any other engine with support for deferred decals, you would first need a decal atlas, which is a single texture sheet containing all the individual decals. To create such an atlas in DECALmachine, place your cursor where it's convenient, and bring up the Decal, Atlas and Trim Sheet Creation panel. Make sure it's in Atlas mode, and set to New. The first decision you should make is, what kind of an atlas you want to create. You can create an atlas from normal map decals, which don't have color maps. Or you can create an atlas from info decals, which have color maps, but no normal maps. Or, you can create a combined atlas containing all decal types. You can change this later on too, but I think you'll want to create separate atlases in most cases. I choose normal, and keep the other settings as they are. If you make sure to have nothing selected, the atlas will be created from all visible decals, but you could also make a selection to create an atlas from the selected decals only. As always, you can follow the progress in the terminal, but it should be pretty quick, depending on the amount of decals you have. The atlas will be represented by an object like this, and a gizmo for every decal in it. The atlas and its contents will also be shown in the panel, along with various properties and tools. Clicking a decal in the list will select its gizmo in the 3D view. You can control scroll through the list, and you can change the sorting of it, either by name, or by packing order. Set a good name for your atlas, so you can identify it later on. You can also see the current atlas resolution here, and adjust the parallax strength. Although the parallax should be perfect out of the box. The gizmos on the individual decals are used to adjust the size of a decal in the atlas. A decal that's smaller than its original resolution will turn green, while a decal that's bigger will be red. If you have red decals in your atlas, you will waste texture space, so avoid this. The only exception are stretched or repeated panel decals, which I'll talk about in a bit. A decal's size can be reset to its original resolution, using the small backwards arrow to the left of its name. And if you scale multiple decals, you can reset them all at once, using the same arrow button to the right. And by the way, to select a decal in the 3D view, you have to scale it and hit the escape key, before letting go of the mouse. This seems to be a limitation of the gizmo system in Blender right now. With a decal selected, you can resize it using the scaling tools to the right. With the Shift key pressed, you can do the same in smaller increments. And with the Control key pressed, you can scale all decals of an atlas at once, which can also be combined with the Shift key. Once you have changed a decal's size, you need to repack the atlas, because the atlas you see in the 3D view is just a representation and a preview of the actual atlas textures, which are recreated every time you repack. I'm scaling a few of the decals some more, to get closer to a 1K resolution. It's a good idea to stay slightly above your target resolution, if you want to achieve the most efficient packing solution. Now, there are a few panel decals in this atlas, and you want to pay attention to the ones with detail in them. Like this one, which also has an emission map by the way, which is the green part. All panel decals can be pre-packed at the top of the atlas. This is necessary for all panel decals with detail in them, and it's also useful if you intend to turn the atlas into a trim sheet. Panel decals with detail in them should be pre-packed in repeat mode. For others, stretch mode is sufficient, but repeat works for them just as well. Basically, if you can afford to, you could always pre-pack panel decals in repeat mode, and you have that option at the very beginning, before the atlas is first created. So let's actually pre-pack the other panel decals as well. Stretching out panel decals like this will increase the total atlas resolution quite a bit. So I'm scaling all decals some more, to get closer to 1K again. Now, let's say you notice a decal with too much or too little parallax. This can happen with elongated decals, because parallax, at least in DECALmachine, works best with square texture sizes, and so it can be tricky to find the correct value on the individual, non-square decals. To adjust the parallax amount for individual decals in the atlas, you simply adjust it on the decal in the scene, and repack the atlas. In the atlas, since it itself is square, the parallax should work perfectly. Note that you can always take a look at the actual atlas textures by going into the so-called Instant Atlas folder. The height map here has been normalized, which means it's using the maximum value range from black to white, while keeping the mid value, representing the surface level, constant at 50%. Normalization can be disabled, which will result in a lower contrast height map. And although I don't recommend it, you can also turn off compensation, which will leave the original decal height maps untouched, and will not modify them based on the decal size in the atlas. Since the height map represents a physical dimension in 3D space, the smaller a decal size is in relation to the atlas, the lower its height map contrast needs to be. So if I decrease this decal size some more, and leave height compensation disabled, watch how the amount of parallax increases. Turn compensation on, and its height map will be adjusted to properly represent the intended depth. So far we've been in repack mode the entire time, which just means that DECALmachine will decide where decals are located in the atlas, while you can control the size of each one. In tweak mode, however, you can control the positioning too, giving you ultimate control over the atlas. With great power comes great responsibility though. In tweak mode, you can end up with overlapping decals, or decals being cut off by the atlas boundary. In repack mode, you have the option to let DECALmachine determine the smallest possible atlas size, or alternatively attempt to hit a specific size. In tweak mode, you can only choose a specific size, because with no decals being repacked, there is no minimum size to be determined. Choose a resolution too small, and some decals will be cropped. Going back to repack mode, now with the 2K resolution, we'll then position the decals in a completely different way, always favoring the packing solution with the least height. And if you go below what we know as the minimum size in repack mode, the resolution will simply be increased to ensure every decal fits. Finally, you can of course increase the padding to your liking, and I suggest using even numbers here. Once you are happy with your atlas, you can store it in your assets location, which can be compared to adding an instant decal to a decal library. And if you want to hit a power of 2 resolution, you can simply enable resizing now. If you take a look in the Atlases folder in your Assets location, you will find your new atlas there. An atlas is always defined by the textures, as well as the data file. Always keep that data file, it's essential and it mathematically describes where every decal is located in the atlas. At this point you can actually remove the atlas from the blend file. And the best way to do it is using the built-in removal tool. Since the atlas was stored, it will now also appear in the export panel, along with the example atlases and trim sheet, but more on that in the atlas export video. Instead of creating a new atlas, you also have the option to import an existing one. Just switch the panel to import and navigate to the location of an atlas, which again, is described by a set of textures in the data.json file. You could then make the same changes as before. Or you could add or remove decals, which I'm going to show next on another example. So since the previous atlas was created specifically from the decals of this probe asset, it won't be very reusable for different assets, unless you stick exactly to the very same decals used in it for all your next designs. What you can do instead is create an atlas from one or multiple decal libraries. To bring in an entire decal library, hold down the Alt key while clicking on the Libraries button. With all the decals you need visible in the scene, create another atlas, exactly as before. And again, let's bring the size down a bit, this time approaching 2K. And if you want, you can pin the tools list to the bottom, which can be useful if you have a lot of decals in the atlas. Now let's say you want to add new decals to an existing atlas. All you have to do is select them, then select the atlas object last, and choose Add Decals from the panel. The new decals will appear in the list, and as empty gizmos in the 3D view, next to the atlas. You can now either repack, or manually position them in tweak mode. Repacking will then most likely change the location of other decals as well. And here they are, part of the atlas now. As before, this is an atlas created from normal map decals only, and so these are the texture types you get from such an atlas. If you now add an info decal, you would get a combined atlas, which will have an additional color map. Note that for normal map decals, mid-gray will be used for color. To remove a decal from an atlas, make sure it's selected, and click the Remove button to the right of the decal list. Follow up by repacking, or tweaking the atlas. If you now wanted to store this atlas, you could again enable resizing, which would bring it down to exactly 2K. Atlases created from info decals work exactly the same, and would be turned into a combined atlas, if you were to add a normal map decal to it. And that's really all there is to atlas creation. Check out the Export Atlas video next, where I cover how to actually use and export an atlas to your target engine.